to really start bringing that entrepreneurial community to a place that we feel like could really benefit from it and excel with it. So that's about all I got right now.
Awesome. So we'll also be joined here by Bruce Weeks, who's the Director of Constituent Services. Right now he's on mute and doesn't show video, but surely we'll get him active. But really just to let you all know first about Startup Grind and give you some information on it. Startup Grind is the world's largest community of entrepreneurs. Now, specifically, when we say the word startup, we mean a high-growing business. High-growth businesses are businesses that hit 7 or 8 figures in revenue, and they typically receive investment from angel investors or venture capitalists. And through that, we are really excited to bring a startup ecosystem to Atlantic City, New Jersey, a place that has been known to have a lot of casinos and other types of attractions, but you have never thought of Atlantic City as a place to go and check out your latest startups. Silicon Valley is a very popular place where there's companies like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and other big tech companies. Well, the idea of startup ecosystems is that they can exist outside of Silicon Valley. So we're really excited to be bringing that to Atlantic City, New Jersey, and we really look forward to having Atlantic City as a tech hub, a technology hub that can operate as a very important emerald and mecca for innovation as we go past COVID and go into next year. We're really excited to see how we can curate awesome opportunities for people that want to launch a startup. So today's topic, how to launch a startup in Atlantic City, we're going to be going over a few key points that really reflect what is a startup and how do you define startups in 2020 and beyond. And Tim Donovan here is the co-founder of Contact Code. He is a local founder based in the Atlantic City area. I myself am a venture capitalist. I've been a 3-time founder. And then we also have Bruce Weeks. So why don't we start off with some quick intros and then we can go from there.
Sounds good. My name is Tim Donovan. I grew up in Somers Point. I currently live in Linwood. Spent some time living in Philly and in Delaware, and came back home. My wife always likes to say that the Jersey Shore is the vortex. Like no matter how far you go trying to get away from it, it always sucks you back in. And there's reason for that. It's because we have a great place to live, but we want to be able to push those opportunities for everyone and bigger opportunities, as in as Josh alluded to, the venture capital, where if you have an idea and you want to see that to fruition, how do you go about doing that? Where everybody needs help. And from myself, as Josh said, a co-founder of a startup locally, a lot of times you have to go outside of the area, like up to Philly or other places to meet people that are in your world and in that world and want to be able to help you, because there really aren't that many opportunities down here. So we're trying to change that, and that's what we're bringing Startup Grind to Atlantic City for.
And then Bruce, quick intro for you as well.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce Weeks. I'm currently the Constituent Services Director for the Mayor's Office here at the City of Atlantic City. I want to thank Tim and Joshua for having me on the Startup Grind launch tonight. I'm born and raised in Atlantic City, graduated from Howard University, degree in finance, have experience working at a startup straight out of college, a financial tech startup. Moved back to the Atlantic City area, I want to say in 2017. Held a few different positions, one at Atlantic Care. Most recently, I was at Edmonds GovTech, which is a software company, a ERP software company based out of Egg Harbor Township. Worked with a bunch of different municipalities in the tri-state area, helping to implement that software for those governments. So I have a very mixed background of finance, government, technology, and just looking to kind of help, like, as they say, grow this community a little larger, because to Tim's point, we're greatly missing it, and not just Atlantic City, but the region. So I think Startup Grind is going to be a great way to kind of, be that spark plug to get this engine going. So looking forward to having these guys throw this launch tonight. but looking even more forward to the continued partnership between the City of Atlantic City and Startup Grind.
Beautiful. Really appreciate that. So real quick, I'm an Atlantic City native. I've pretty much, spent my whole life and childhood in Atlantic City, in between New York City. And when in Atlantic City, I was really, adamant about doing a few things. One was building startup ecosystems. In 2016, I did a number of things, from, writing a book and organizing community, including Black Lives Matter. But collectively, my focus has always been on how do we create economic advantages for participants that are very local. As you know, majority of the workforce in Atlantic City is not from Atlantic City. So a lot of people think about getting a job as a solution, but I've always thought about entrepreneurship as a solution. So I left Atlantic City, moved to Atlanta, spent some time in Atlanta with my own startup. In 2014, I had an exit. And after my exit, I was able to utilize some of those resources to travel. And then I ended up in Silicon Valley. And then I ended up launching a venture capital firm called VIC Capital. One of the things that's significant about Atlantic City is that I don't even know if many people even know what venture capitalists do, but essentially they are investors. Typically, when you look at investors, you think about real estate, you think about debts, you think about number of asset classes. Well, venture capitalists invest in companies like Facebook, Airbnb, Twitter, LinkedIn. They invest in these tech companies that you see become public companies. So traditionally, to launch a startup, you would need access to capital. You would need a problem worth solving, a big problem worth $1 billion. And that has a very, very relevant need in the world, where you can essentially launch a software or even a product for users or customers that have a true need. An example of this as a use case is Uber. When Uber first launched, they didn't invent taxis. Taxis was already around. What they did do, though, is that they invented a way for you to connect with people that wanted to give you a ride or wherever you're going, and you could pay them directly. And when they did that, ride sharing became a whole new industry. And as we have seen today, it has literally disrupted the taxi business tenfold. There's an Uber in almost every city. And there's people that make money from driving Uber as a part-time or full-time income. So when you have a disruptive idea, that's really the way launching a startup happens. So going into our event now and kind of like focusing on what is a startup, I'm going to take a few moments to talk about what a startup is by asking Tim some critical questions around how he launched Contact Code. So Tim, can you share with us, a little bit about how you and Bruce came to know each other?
So
before we get into that.
Yeah, so I met Bruce actually a couple months ago. It was March. We were talking about before the call. Was right when the NCAA tournament was about to start, and things started getting shut down from COVID. But we actually had a quick meeting in the mayor's office about bringing a chapter of Startup Grind here. I found out about Startup Grind because I have a startup, and my business partner and I, Dominic Doherty, who's actually on the call, we went out to San Francisco to their global conference and met a couple people out there that had started a chapter in their local communities as well. And that kind of spoke to me right away that I wanted to bring that kind of community to Atlantic City and to South Jersey itself. So Contact Code itself is a startup. It came as an idea that Dominic had. He bartends in Atlantic City part-time and is a teacher as well. He was going to events as an administrator for Pleasantville school system, and was getting a lot of business cards at conferences and stuff like that to learn about new textbooks and everything, and started getting all these business cards, and was like, I don't know what to do with them. Why is this still a thing? Why are we still doing business cards? And he was bartending one night. His guy's wife said, he was talking to the customer, and the customer wanted to give Dominic his business card, and his wife popped her head back in and was like, "What are you going to do with that? You're just going to throw it out anyway." And it kind of clicked in him, like, why can't it just be on your cell phone and you just exchange it, easily, simply, be able to share it, not have to worry about business cards and paper and all the minutia that goes in after it. So at that point, Contact Code was kind of born. He came to me because I'm the numbers kind of guy. and he's the idea guy. And sometimes it's not your idea that you need to push, because with a startup, you gotta work with other people, and you can't do it yourself.
No, that's very, very important to talk about. That's very super. So Bruce, how about you? How did you first come into your first startup, or even working at the first startup you had right out of college?
So I pretty much applied to the company. It was a Wall Street based financial tech startup. And I started out as an analyst. The company was obviously pretty lean and small coming out. I want to say it was probably about 30 employees, but we were generating significant revenue because we were able to corner a market in the financial markets that wasn't being met. So like you said earlier, Joshua, it's about finding a big problem and solving it. And it was very interesting seeing how the CEO maneuvered throughout the years, because how we started, if you were to take a look back when I was there in 08 or started in 08 and where they are now, they're on target to be like the next Berkshire Hathaway in terms of cryptocurrency. And that had nothing to do with the company when I first started. They just kept finding more and more different problems to solve, I guess you can say, throughout time. And the ability to be able to maneuver and be agile was very important as a startup. So, the environment was a wealth of knowledge, I would say. I got hit with a lot early on, because at a startup you get a lot of responsibility, and I can say that because my next job was at a global bank, and it was very bureaucratic. The environment was pretty stuffy, and they pretty much were known for doing certain things throughout years and years and decades of experience. So I would say the startup experience was probably my favorite experience ever in terms of my professional background, because I was able to take on so much and learn so much early on, but also just seeing how the founder was able to shift and raise capital, and be more strategic in terms of his long-term vision. And to be honest, he was really a revolutionary in the financial world. His name is Barry Silbert. If you were to look him up, he was one of the first investors in cryptocurrency. Now he owns, he's pretty much cornered that market. It's tremendous what he's been able to do. But I kind of want to see some of that get sparked here in Atlantic City. So I'm pretty excited that we are having this conversation tonight. And I want to gain more insight from you guys on your plan, and how you plan on implementing Startup Grind and the outreach that you guys want to do. I think it's going to be important that we attract people from throughout the region, not just Atlantic City. So again, I'm looking forward to hearing more about you guys' plan on that.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I'm super excited to share that with you. I would say to you real briefly, right now there's about, give or take, 80 million workers in America that are paid hourly, and there's about 55 million low-wage service jobs. And in Atlantic City is known for its seasonal workforce and is known for service jobs, something that's scheduled to be outdated as automation and AI take off. And for those who don't know, AI is artificial intelligence. But just thinking about automation and the state of, needing to be a part of this knowledge economy, in a way in which you use your knowledge and your specialized skill set to get ahead. Tim, how do you think startups play a role in that? And why is being a startup founder important in 2020 and beyond?
I feel like there's a lot of things out there that I don't know. There's a lot of things out there that people have ideas about, and just don't know how to move it forward. You know what I mean? There's just plenty of people out there that, they might deal with something in their day-to-day lives that hasn't been figured out how to change that. So, being able to meet other people and like I said, talk about how you get through over hurdles and things like that might be something that somebody in their own startup has gone through. So it's really just that community aspect of things, and trying to get, other people that have a voice or have an idea, be able to get them a voice too.
And then same question for you, Bruce. How do you think startups can help people adapt to the disruption of low-wage service jobs and be a part of a more holistic economy that represents digital skills and remote work?
specifically in Atlantic City, you would have to kind of examine the industries that are already here. Not only that, but the industries that we're looking to attract to kind of supplement what is obviously our money maker, which is a dying breed, which is the casino industry, the tourism industry. A couple of things that they're looking at, one in particular is the blue economy. How do we utilize our natural resources? So natural wind companies, so like Ørsted's moving in. There's going to be a huge company. Are there any startups or are there any ideas out there to help either augment or disrupt in a way that industry? Another, obvious industry that's here now is Stockton University. So they're pushing eds and meds, as they call it. And then lastly, I would say aviation. We have the tech center out in, I believe it's Egg Harbor Township. And aviation and cybersecurity is going to be a huge burgeoning industry, not just throughout South Jersey, but throughout the country. So we need to kind of foster a community of startup individuals that can come together and build off of each other. I think the most important thing as a government that we can try to do, that I think we should do, is to kind of build some kind of shared workspace, because right now there's no place for startup or like-minded people to even actually physically meet. There's no dedicated space. As you know, as a startup, you have very low overhead. Most of your capital is put towards either building a product or using coding, building a website. But you don't need much more than like a desk or access to Wi-Fi, a conference room to hold meetings. We need to have more resources locally readily available. I think that the closest shared workspace is probably either Millville. I know for a fact there's one in Cherry Hill Mall. So we've been engaging with a few different organizations to try to help build that out. But we need to know what the appetite is, because I may know a handful of people, but we need to be able to bring to the table, like, okay, we have this amount of many startup founders or want to be startup founders, and this, there's a huge demand for this. I will add that one of the things that this administration has rolled out, which Mayor Small was very supportive of, is our Small Business Academy. Because what I wanted to do was kind of mimic what Goldman Sachs has done throughout the country, which was their small business, 100,000 small business initiative, but just kind of build it out locally. So we created partnerships with Stockton University, ACCC, to help build a curriculum free to residents to kind of teach them from end to end how to start your business, how to build a real business plan, because I think people overlook the amount of research and time that goes into actually planning your business, how to run it, from a marketing standpoint, branding, promotions. We also have a financial aspect to it, with accounting and banking and credit. And then we're actually going to have kind of like a sales pitch competition similar to Shark Tank, where we have built these relationships with different organizations and community financial institutions to have them come in and say, hey, we're willing to fund this idea because this is a good idea. Your business plan is sound, you're bankable, or you're investable in a sense. So we want to kind of back into the whole funding part. And I think the best way to get there is through a formalized education. So if someone has a good idea, but they don't know where to start, we're going to have all those partnerships ready for them and have a nine week curriculum for them to go through to kind of craft their business so that, when it's time to go get funding, they're absolutely ready to have those conversations. So I think that's a great start for us in trying to get people to be more entrepreneurial minded, because as you can see, COVID, even before COVID, but we learned a lot that the world's shifting to remote in a sense as well. So technology is going to be huge. I think the limits are endless. So we have to kind of get it started. But I think Startup Grind is a great template to start with for us, because we don't know where to start at this point. But I think you guys coming in with a organization such as Startup Grind, who has that experience, I think that's a great start for us in this region.
That's great to know. I would now like to start with the key question that is probably on everybody's mind. What is a startup? Like, really defining it in terms of like what we mean by that word, because the concept of small business and the concept of launching a startup is very different and broad, depending on what ecosystem you're in and what region you're in. So launching a startup, let's say in Miami, maybe a little bit different than Silicon Valley, maybe a little bit different than Atlanta or New York or Philly, and also the requirements to get investors. But before we get into that part, just really quick, can you share with us, Tim, first, what is a Startup Grind in your own words, and then Bruce as well?
I think to me, a startup was born out of being an idea. It was an idea, and then we kind of researched, what could this be? Has anybody else tried this? Where did they fall? Where did they fail? Where is our product a little different from theirs? A lot of that kind of stuff, to me, is a startup. It's just an idea, but it needs to be watered, and you give it sunlight and all that good stuff to let it grow. But like I said earlier, you need other people's ups and downs as well.
Awesome. How about yourself, Bruce? What is a startup in your own words?
Now, startup to me is just simply like two things. So is it disruptive, A, and is it scalable, B? If it's those two things, I think it can be built into something with the right founder, with the right board around that founder, and the right program around it, whether it's an accelerator or whatnot. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So to me, a startup is a company, like you said, high potential, high growth, but is solving a huge problem? And B, is it scalable? Can you grow it out? Is it something that's easily transferable into other markets?
That's beautiful. I'm going to give a really specific definition for all those watching. When we use the word startup, we mean emerging growth company. Emerging growth companies are classified by the Securities Exchange Commission as businesses that have at least less than 1.07 billion in annual revenue. So what that really means is, typically when you have companies, you have to report a lot of things to the government, especially to the public. So you look at publicly traded companies, they report a lot of things about, their financials and what's happening with the company. An example of this is Elon Musk. Whenever he tweets or does something, the government's on his behind, and people are always, analyzing his company. But private companies, they have stock. So the difference between a small business that may be a sole proprietorship or limited liability company is that typically a startup is a C corporation, and it's a private corporation that essentially has shares known as common shares. And when you have shares in your business, you typically, with a startup, will get investment from investors for equity. So they wouldn't give you a debt instrument or a loan for your business. That's traditional small business where you get a loan. With startups, you're really actually having people hold equity in your business, and they're basically hoping that one day you get acquired. What that means is you get bought by another company. Okay, so an example of this is Facebook acquired Instagram. Facebook acquired WhatsApp. And this happens a lot in terms of startup innovation. Whenever people launch great ideas, there's typically a period where they exit. One of my favorite startups is Mailchimp, and many of you might not know what Mailchimp is. It's essentially an email marketing software for small businesses. They became a unicorn, and that phrase means billion-dollar company, and they did it with no capital from outside investors. What that means is they bootstrapped their startup. And my favorite startups are bootstrap startups like Mailchimp and Craigslist, because the founders kept the wealth in-house and they were able to leverage that wealth to reinvest in their communities. Now, for companies that get acquired or go public, that wealth transfer is that investors make money off of the money invested, and then the founder becomes wealthy, typically a multimillionaire. So what would it mean for you both, Tim and Bruce, if we have some companies become startups? Because now there might be businesses like nonprofits or for-profits, but they may be open to becoming a startup and pivoting because of the climate and potentially having an exit. What do you think that would mean for Atlantic City and surrounding areas to have startups come, launch, and then successfully exit? Maybe start with you, Bruce, and then you, Tim.
What do I think? So you're asking me
in terms of like, what would a founder launching in Atlantic City now today, and then maybe 5 years later, their company get acquired? What would that success do for our ecosystem?
Oh, that would be huge for our ecosystem. I mean, that would be huge for our city in general. I think we've been looking for a while for the next home run. There's not a lot of good news or a lot of positive things business-wise coming out of the city. So, we have to shift gears at some point. I think somehow building out the community, because I don't think that this startup that we're speaking of is going to pull itself out of thin air. I think that it already has to kind of be in motion. but it needs to be attached to something. They need to know that it's possible. They need access to VC money, to private investors. So I think we need to actually back into it. We need to build out the community first, because right now I'm not sure if we even have something that's ready, that's startup ready. To be quite honest with you, we may, but we don't know what's out there. So I think that's why I said this is a good start to build that community out. That way the awareness is there. We know, okay, we have this amount of companies looking to kind of go this route, and we're going to help them get there from a resource standpoint. But to your point, I think it would be huge. But I think we need to, again, build that community out first and then back into it.
Beautiful. How about yourself, Tim?
Yeah, I think it would show that it would show that ideas can come from anywhere. I mean, Silicon Valley was not always the mecca of capital and startups. If you show somebody if you show that it can be done, all that's going to do is foster more ideas, more people to buy into the idea that, hey, it could happen to me too. And it's also bringing more attention from people like Joshua and other venture capitalists that, hey, maybe there is something going on there, that there's some good ideas that are coming from this area or this region, and start investing more money in. And then you start the snowball effect where, wow, now there's 2, 3, 5, 10, startups that came out of Atlantic City or this region. It only takes one to start it, I feel like.
Yeah, no, definitely. I appreciate that. So maybe a quick example. We all may or not be familiar with a company called Shopify. Shopify did this in the Toronto area, or for Canada, where it became the highest value e-commerce startup that went public. And what that did for Canada, outside of the fact that Canada was already known for artificial intelligence and a number of great innovation areas, Canada actually erupted with companies going there and creating offices to source talent from these areas. Now, what is happening outside of Silicon Valley is that a lot of big tech companies like your Googles, Microsofts, Amazons, what they're doing is they're going from this big campus model where they have like a huge headquarters that's not going to go away, to what we consider a hub and spoke model. Hub offices in different major cities or different areas as hubs, and then they have remote workforces in different areas that can pop in and pop out of co-working spaces, and that's a spoke. So the hub and spoke model is going to actually add a lot of value to what's to come. And one of our friends here, Jimmy Whitehead, he launched the Vision Center here in Atlantic City through the government to bring cybersecurity jobs and also contact tracing jobs to Atlantic City, which is a first good proof of concept of bringing a non-traditional industry into Atlantic City like cybersecurity. So what do you both think are some good industries that can come to Atlantic City, specifically things that we haven't thought of? So, and when I say this, I also mean things like blockchain and cryptocurrency, which is not necessarily an industry, but it's a type of innovation. So what kinds of innovations or ideas do you think are good for our community to look into if they want to start trailblazing this route? Bruce or Tim?
I'll jump in there. I think I'm going to piggyback off what Bruce said, was the aviation side of things. We have the tech center out in Pomona, the 177th, and we also have the Atlantic City Airport. But there may be some other things out there as well, like maybe some a little bigger port to New York City, where you could have water transfers and stuff like that. I think all these things have been spoken about in the past, but there's never been that influx of capital or money to be able to get that stuff done. But we have such a great location and everything else that we have going for this area. It's just it's a shame that like you said, there needs to be more influx of capital and stuff.
Yes, awesome, thank you. And Bruce, how about yourself? What areas of innovation do you think will work very well in Atlantic City?
Yeah, I guess I kind of hinted on it earlier. The whole the blue economy. How do we tap into our local parochial surroundings, which is what makes us unique, the oceanfront, right? I think that blockchain is amazing, but that can be done anywhere in a sense, right? If we're talking about really building out an actual niche, I think we would have to kind of tap into what's our natural resources here, And again, I think the whole eds and meds piece with Stockton University moving in South Jersey gas, there's some opportunity there as well, grow and augment off of that. But again, as Tim said, I think aviation is probably the thing that's most closest in terms of being an actual success for us as an industry, because it's already being built out. They already have their own ecosystem, and the technology, from my understanding, is changing within the aviation space in general. So they're modernizing a lot within that industry, which is going to help, I guess, for a startup to break into that potentially. So we're looking forward to whatever's next. But there are a bunch of things that are being thrown out there. There's no set in stone one industry that's going to be the next big thing for us. But I think we're looking at a handful of things, and hopefully we get the ball rolling on all of them and see which one becomes the most successful.
Okay, no, that's really good. I think that's really helpful. I want to take a step back, and also for the people in the audience to mention one area that we haven't talked about, which is software as a service. Subscription-based applications are very popular nowadays, where you see that you subscribe to an app and it gives you access to resources such as Instacart or Uber. These are on-demand economies, so they're not subscriptions. Netflix subscription. In apps like that. So there's actually a barbershop app called Squire, and Squire was launched by a founder. He raised recently $34 million collectively. His last round in June 2019 raised an $8 million round by a Series A round, and at the time they already had $12 million in funding. So the reason I'm sharing Squire with you is because that's a Black-owned point of sale system for barbershops. Okay, it's very digestible. Meaning you can launch an app or a subscription-based startup that is very simple. It doesn't have to necessarily be what we would consider capital intensive. That means that the business requires a significant amount of capital to get off the ground. So there's a lot of startup ideas that could become a subscription. One of the best examples is this. On the boardwalk, there's already trolleys and walkers that go back and forth. Well, can you imagine if you had a subscription to go on unlimited rides on the boardwalk with these trolleys or with these walkers that are actually a job for some people. They do that, year round. They give people tours of Atlantic City on the boardwalk, and you pay some money to go 3 miles on a tour and then get off at your chosen destination. That could easily be a subscription-based business if you partner with the companies doing it, to then pay out the vendors that are independent contractors pushing the carts. And the reason I'm bringing that to your attention is because there's what's called the sharing economy. The sharing economy is repurposing goods and services in the form of a marketplace where you have buyers and sellers. And right now, there's already ways in which we can support our ecosystem through the sharing economy. And I'll definitely get into that later at another advent, but you want to throw that out there because SaaS startups cost little to nothing to start from home. And hopefully, as we do more events, we'll get into those types of businesses. So real briefly, I want to also now turn it over to Bruce. In this segment, we're going to transition into why Atlantic City. Atlantic City, for the record, has been a very blessed and, also kind of crazy space. Bruce already mentioned the blue economy, but really the space that's called is clean technology or clean tech. Clean tech innovation has been getting a lot of investment recently because of climate change. Our climate is changing because of the natural atmosphere, like carbon emissions in the atmosphere and other things. And really, clean tech is a great area that we can leverage in Atlantic City to bring solutions to fight against some of the issues that are happening in our country. So, Bruce, I would like to share with you real briefly that we're excited about Atlantic City, but a lot of people don't understand the value of Atlantic City outside of the casinos. And when I always tell people, hey, I'm from Atlantic City, like, there's a community there. I thought it was just casinos. Very, very common. And they don't even know that there's a large community of very famous and well-off people that have come from Atlantic City, unbeknownst to them. So real quickly, can you share with us why Atlantic City? Why is Atlantic City a melting pot for innovation? And more importantly, why now?
I mean, we're a melting pot for innovation simply because we're a melting pot, right? I mean, if you look at the demographics, there's something north of like 27 different languages being spoken in Atlantic City, different dialects. So that's very important to know because like diversity is key. You want a diverse amount of ideas, a diverse amount of perspectives when you talk about being disruptive, because us three may have an idea about something, but a completely different cultural aspect to it. There may be a whole nother market that we're not tapping into, or a whole nother idea we're not even looking at from a startup perspective. So I think the diverse population in Atlantic City is very rich, and that culture is something that we need to tap into, and making it more mainstream. Also, we're kind of at like a paradigm shift here in Atlantic City. I mean, again, the casinos are a dying breed. I think COVID really dramatically changed that a lot. So we are forced now, we're in the fourth quarter, we have to find something next, because if you even look at it from our budget perspective, the revenues that we're going to anticipate next year aren't going to be what they were supposed to be because of COVID. So we have to diversify this economy. That doesn't mean we have to bring in a huge industry right away. I think one of the better ways of doing it is to grow smaller communities that are successful within their own right. So for instance, if you would take a look at what they're doing, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Orange Loop in Atlantic City. So that's the beach block between Pacific and Boardwalk, which on New York Avenue and Tennessee Avenue. They're creating a pocket of economics where it's, okay, we're going to make this a live, work, play development. And there's probably about 3 or 4 different developers working on this concept. And they built a yoga studio. They built different restaurants. They're building apartments. But they want to do it in a sort of a small pocket, see if they can get it right, and then take that model and scale it throughout the city. Because as you know, there's a lot of undeveloped land. There's a lot of opportunity from a development standpoint. But to my earlier point, I would personally like to see and work towards a startup community. And ideally, again, I would like to kind of have a dedicated shared workspace concept somewhere in the city that's accessible, easily accessible to the residents, a place where people know, okay, throughout the region, I can go here and work on my business. They're having events, they're bringing guest speakers, investors know about this place. But also people can kind of meet each other and build their ideas off of each other as well. Eventually grow that into a more structured incubator space. And then later on down the line, maybe even have something as advanced as an accelerator in Atlantic City. But I think from a resource standpoint, we have to be more business friendly, right? We have to create an environment that's inviting to businesses. We have to kind of brand it and make it attractive. I think we haven't been doing that over the years. So I think Startup Grind is a great way to kind of get that spark plugged. But again, there's a lot of opportunity in terms of new industries. Again, I mentioned, not just the blue economy, but again, the utility industry. At what point is that going to be disrupted in a sense? That's going to be tough, but I think, with the right ideas, with the right community, we can start to examine some of the things that we can go after. I guess what I wanted to say, we kind of hit on a few things earlier. But what I wanted to say was, you mentioned Silicon Valley and how it came about. And I'm not sure if you're aware of Silicon Alley, which is in New York, in the Flatiron District. Mm-hmm. So how do we kind of become something similar to that? And the idea I came up with was, the Silicon Shore. How do we brand that? Right, and have the Silicon Shore, maybe it's one block in Atlantic City, but people know in the region, okay, I'm going here, that's a startup community. We have Stockton here, the kids that are, in school there will be interacting with, Silicon Shore, students from growing. There's a lot of ways you can grow it, even from a university standpoint. But we have to make it attractive I'm speaking from a government perspective. We have to simply build it out. And I think, again, having someone come in that's an organization that has the resources and the intellect can help us kind of shape and craft a model that is, again, attractive for people to want to come and be a part of. But it all starts with awareness, right? Like you said, we need one startup to happen and to be successful, and then people will flock to it. But how do we even get to that point, right? I mean, we have to have an organization that knows what they're doing, and that has a model and a blueprint to make that accessible. So at some point, I think we need to create a community here in Atlantic City that's both business friendly and startup friendly, and people have to be aware of it. We have to market it very heavily to the community.
On this chat, I actually put the link in. If you want, the Startup Grind membership is free if you get accepted. You use myself or Tim as a referral. I would say that's the first way to take on this. I love the concept of I believe that a public-private partnership has already been done in Atlantic City with the, example of Stockton University coming and bringing in private investors. In this scenario, we have in December, a friend of mine that's going to be speaking, because I'm actually a mentor in a number of accelerators, including Techstars. And he is a managing director at Techstars right now, and he's going to be talking about why accelerators matter. But before we even get into accelerators, I think the most important thing is to create a fail-safe environment. Meaning, when you fail as a small business, you typically lose tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, we can name on many hands and toes how many small businesses have come and gone in the Atlantic City area, from convenience stores to restaurants, so on and so forth, and how much debt, small business debt, they had to acquire just to get off the ground and get approved. The good thing about a startup is that as long as you have an address, a business address or a virtual address, you can launch it right from your bedroom, right? And then from that, you don't need to have the brick and mortar overhead, as Bruce had mentioned earlier. But you have to understand software. You have to understand technology. There is a need to upskill our community. And I think there's already like Ideal Institute in Atlantic County doing a lot of work with that. There's a number of other players such as Stockton and others. But we need to it's not about teaching people how to code. It's really teaching people how to run a digital business, such as an e-commerce business. You have like already artists like Busy Bugatti, or even Shy GMD. These are artists from Atlantic City, hip hop artists, or DJ 5D, very, very well-known DJ from Atlantic City, that have built their own brands and they're influencers and they have a following. But on the flip side, for startups that may have a product that isn't a software, what are some of the great products that people could come up with that may not be a app? Like, what kind of products do you think are in our community right now? Because there are product entrepreneurs. They may have a invention or some type of e-commerce product that they've launched and they made themselves, or that they're looking to commercialize. What do you think some good type of products are out there for the Atlantic City ecosystem, or some that we may not know of?
Pretty, that's an interesting question. So you're saying, are there any local current
product entrepreneurs, non-software?
From a software perspective, I don't know too many, to be quite honest with you.
Well, not software. I mean, like products, like physical products, like e-commerce.
So obviously, a lot of people gravitate towards retail clothing, right? So there are a number of people who are launching their own clothing lines here in the city. Like you said, there are a number of artists here in the city. Music is huge here, a part of the culture here in Atlantic City. A lot of people are selling food, right? I mean, there are a bunch of basic product and services that are being constantly, bought and sold here in the city. But how do we make that a digital business or e-commerce business? I mean, that would be ideal, right? For them to have websites and to develop apps and stuff, things of that nature. But I think they're right now they're in the branding stage, right? They're getting their brand off the ground. They're building awareness around what they do. But it's just local in a sense, right? So how do you grow it? How do you make it bigger than what it is? I think a lot of that comes with the formalized education, like we spoke about earlier. So they know how to kind of grow and start, kind of build a more sound business model. I think a lot of people get stuck and then they just kind of stop. But the good thing about some of these businesses they aren't capital intensive, right? They aren't, renting out stores and hiring a bunch of employees and paying all these overhead costs. So, there may be a sweet spot there in terms of creating these businesses into a digital model. But again, we need to know what's out there. We need to have a full, inventory of who wants to do what, and are they even attracted to this industry? And I think, again, having an organization come in to get that going is probably a great way to start.
Beautiful. And Tim, do you have anything like to add to that as well, as far as any product entrepreneurs in Atlantic County or even the region area that you know of, and even ways in which why Atlantic City for this specific area? And just for those, real quick, we include clothing lines as a form of a startup. Typically, startups are not service businesses like consulting companies, accountants, lawyers. They are not startups. They can be a small business, but traditionally, a startup is anything that is consistent revenue that doesn't come from a consulting service. Just to throw that out there.
I don't know about the product side of things, but I just kind of wanted to jump on what Bruce was saying about the having a co-working space. Like, I saw Howard threw a question out there. about the co-working space and bringing accelerators and things like that. Like that at Startup Grind, they tell you the first place to start is a co-working space. You want to be able to find places where people are hanging out, talking about ideas, and having a non-judgment free zone of where you can freely talk about what you're thinking, what you've come up with. A lot of times entrepreneurs themselves don't want to talk about their idea because all they're afraid of is somebody's going to go take my idea and make millions of dollars off of it. But, you know, most of the time, most entrepreneurs that hang out with each other are just wanting to talk about, how did you get through this? How did you go around that? You know, they're worried about their own idea, not what your idea is and how can I make money off your idea. That stigma's got to go away, and that's what Startup Grind tries to do. And like I said, the co-working space thing is a great thing to do, where you can just hang out and talk to others and that kind of stuff. And that feeds into creating accelerators and all those other things that come along after.
Beautiful, beautiful. So that's a great transition in addressing that question. We're kind of now, I'm gonna just throw this out there since Howard says, I'm gonna be frank with everyone here. A non-disclosure agreement, I throw them in the trash whenever people send them to me. The likelihood of someone stealing your idea is not, because to be frank, in startups, there's too many ideas and not enough execution. So you have a lot of people that come up with great ideas, but because it's all about who executes. That's really what matters. And ideas they have an expiration date. So for the most part, I would say that what's more important than an NDA or even just keeping your idea to yourself is figuring out a fail-safe zone. And typically co-working spaces are great fail-safe environments where you can fail a few times and nobody's chastising you like, oh, you're wrong, you're horrible, you shouldn't do this, this isn't the right thing, go get a job. You want to be around a community of people that can encourage you to go after what you're doing, even if you're failing, because failing forward is better than quitting. Okay, so I want to open it up to questions as we begin to wrap up here. So if you have any questions, just pop them up in the chat, or there's a Q&A section. You can start a Q&A. Feel free to just ask us any questions here. And in the meantime, I would love to see Bruce. Do you have any questions for us? Maybe we'll start with you. I know you said about our plan with Startup Grind. That's something you threw out there, but maybe a formal question would be great.
Yeah. So my first question would be, what are the next steps, right? So you're doing this launch virtual meeting. What is kind of the roadmap that you guys have in place to implement this into the community of Atlantic City, and not only that, but the diverse communities of Atlantic City?
Yeah, sure. So I think Tim originally brought the concept to the table. I think collectively, an event series where we bring together speakers from all around the world. Preferably it's a physical event. So we do like one big conference a year versus every month having a different event. Because things are virtual, we're actually incentivized to do virtual events. And right now, our plan is really just to start curating the concept. On a bigger picture, the roadmap is that we have access to the virtual community of Startup Grind, and founders, when they get accepted to Startup Ground's virtual community, they actually get a bunch of resources, mentors, and it's somewhat of an accelerator, okay, virtually. So that's actually something we can do right now, is we can start to sandbox people that have great ideas and start to connect them with either Tim or myself, and then we can, connect with them offline. Outside of that, I think is really about entertaining other types of conversations. So after this event, we're going to do a panel called The Future of Atlantic City with the president of the Chambers of Commerce of Atlantic City and Jimmy Whitehead. But outside of that, events are only going to go so far. And I believe the real plan is collaboration. How do we collaborate as an ecosystem? So when you think about an ecosystem, there's many moving parts in the ecosystem. And in places like Silicon Alley, you'll have the local investors, you'll have the local startup founders, you'll have the local accelerators, you also have university. So I think right now we really need to identify who are our local partners, because Startup Grind acts as a catalyst, is not a solution. It could be a solution, but it's more of a catalyst. So for us to catalyze the Silicon Shore, we'll start calling it that, we need to work with you, Bruce, and others like you, and Stockton as well, and the local partners that are already available to then start to identify these opportunities, and then we can catalyze them within these events. But also outside of these events, we can start to actually handpick or at least open up opportunities for founders to become a part of this. Something that a lot of people don't know is has Atlantic City ever had a hackathon?
Local hackathons, I think, within like the high schools and things of that nature. But that's about as far as I've heard of hackathons here.
So we're doing one on December 18th for the Jersey Shore. But outside of that, I think that's a very easy thing to start with, is that we need to have a startup hackathon. And that's like a very easy, digestible way to get stuff done. And in our roadmap, that's something we could put in it. But I'll stop there. Tim, do you have anything else you'd like to share on that side?
No, kind of like Josh said, we're looking to host events and more bring people that have gotten through things that a lot of startups trip up on. People that are willing to tell their story in our signature fireside chats, which is just an intimate interview, one-on-one, and you really just kind of talk to them about how they overcame things, how they came up with their idea, how they move forward with things. So we can bring those events to the community, and that really starts to get eyes on, the number of people that are attending and all that kind of stuff. And then you start getting capital people, investors coming in saying, oh, there's really something going on here. And that's how you can start snowballing things.
Okay, awesome. So I don't see any questions popping up yet. We have about 10 more minutes. I'll leave you to open up with another question. Bruce, feel free to let me know if you have any other questions or anything you'd like us to touch on that's specific. But if not, we could begin to wrap up.
I think good. I asked a number of questions. You guys were very insightful today. So, if no one else that's logged in has any questions, I think I see. Did we answer everything in the chat?
No. So yeah, I think that's it. So as we wrap up here, we'll have our next event on November 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a Thursday. We also want to shout out our partner, Town Square Media South Jersey, for being one of our partners. They're actually playing an ad on the radio right now. You can hear it. It's very, very exciting to have that going. And also Google for Startups, which is a startup program in Google that is encouraging people to launch businesses in the form of a startup. And for Startup Grind holistically, I'll just leave you all with this. In order to attack the problem of launching a startup, you have to first start with what is something that you're dealing with that you're having trouble with. So for instance, some of the best startup ideas didn't actually come from a genius or a super smart guy. It's actually the most common sense solutions that someone came up with because they had a problem themselves. And an example of this is Airbnb. Airbnb, Brian Chesky, when he started that, they actually were renting out their apartment to friends or people that would come and stay in San Francisco for conferences, and they were the first Airbnb host. They just literally put it on their own platform and started renting out their apartment. And now we look at Airbnb as an alternative to hotels. And even though there's an ordinance in Atlantic City to create taxes through Airbnb hosts, it does create tax revenue for cities that have compliant Airbnb hosts. So that was an idea that started in someone's apartment, and now it's a $1 billion company getting ready to go public 10 years later. On average, it takes about a decade to successfully launch a startup. And you may not succeed in your first startup, but you might succeed in your second or third. The whole point is to get started. And I'll leave it there and say that, I've enjoyed everyone's participation in this event. Bruce, we're really, really appreciative to have you. And I'm very, very excited to hear about the Silicon Shore, and would love to see how we can participate in that and put some rocket fuel behind that idea. Tim, as well, thank you for putting this together and having the vision to make this happen. And I'm just super excited to be a fly on the wall and also a resource for those who need one.
Appreciate it, Josh. Great job.
Awesome.
So putting this together.
No doubt. So y'all have a great evening. The Cowboys, I hope will lose today.
Fly, Eagles fly.
I'm not optimistic.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.